Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Park Board. Today's April 12th, 2011. The first item on the evening's agenda is the approval of the March 8th minutes. Do I have a...
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The item 2A, first item under new business is Park Board bylaws. And in the packet, I think John provided us with some sample bylaws from a couple of other communities. I also had I was in touch with the chair of the ETC, and I understand some of the other commissions are working on bylaws as well too. So I thought I saw Manager Neal here. One consideration that I thought merited some discussion was, should there be some consistency in the bylaws, just for the sake of, for current staff, for staff in the future, so there has some similarities between the bylaws, whether it's something like delivering notice, that they have consistency there. So I just made a copy of what I got from her, and I thought I'd pass that along to everybody to take a look at. Let's see, what do we need? 4, 1, 2, 4. And I wouldn't expect everybody to read this here tonight, but 1, 2. Pass it down. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on what we received so far, but one thought that I had was maybe we could take a look at what had been worked on through the ETC along with what John provided us, and maybe over the course of the next month we could highlight some things that we liked in both, and maybe bring it to a discussion at our next meeting. Any thoughts?
Obviously, I know what bylaws are for, but what's the goal here? Sort of what's the little background, John? What's the dynamic we're trying to accomplish here? Obviously, there are already some ordinances in place that sort of structure we report to the council. You know, you can just have basic bylaws which sort of set the framework, and you can also go to the other extreme. And I'm just trying to get a sense of, at least from your perspective, what the goal is here. I know some of the other commissions are working on this as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you notice, I did include in the packet a copy of the Community Health Committee's bylaws, Heritage Preservation Board, the Human Rights and Relations Commission, and the Edina Planning Commission. And as you notice, there's really no two the same. The draft that I put together just as a starting point for the Park Board to review is I tried to keep it simple, to the point. I didn't get into a lot of the detail that the Planning Commission has. You know, this is less than 4 pages for the Park Board. It's really more kind of the order of business. It defines what the roles are of the chair, the vice chair, the officers. It references a little bit about the city code and how that applies to the Park Board. And I tried to capture some of the mission, duties, and function of the Park Board in its most basic form. And I think we captured that. The other thing I tried to incorporate in here is addressing what really does constitute a quorum. We happen to be a board that has 12 members, 2 of which are non-voting. And at what point, when you only have 5 voting members, should that really be a quorum? And I noticed in some of the other commissions, just to be consistent, I thought it would make some sense for the Park Board to consider having 6 voting members required to constitute a quorum. So that's something for you to consider. It just spells out the duties. It would be staff's job to work with the chair to come up with agendas. It makes reference to the ability to form your subcommittees, work groups, and committees, so you don't have to go back to the council each time. It gives the chair the authority to appoint people to those committees. It references Robert's Rule of Orders for parliamentary procedure. Try to capture all that in a simplistic form and not to get too lengthy. Sure, this could be longer and it could possibly be even shorter, but in my view, things are better keep it short and sweet, but certainly open to any and all ideas. I like the idea of consistency, but clearly no two commissions are the same so far, and the council may direct all the commissions to go back and try to fit them into, more of a boilerplate type, but we haven't got that far. So this is a good starting point, I think, for the Park Board's consideration. Long answer to a short question.
No, that's helpful. That frames it a little bit.
I guess one thing I'd recommend including is, excuse me, what would constitute a formal recommendation from the Park Board, seeing as how we have an even number of voting members. Now, that's not always the case, but would we need 6 votes to pass something, or simple majority? Some sort of bylaw in there that says, this was what will constitute a formal recommendation from the Park Board.
We can certainly include that language in there. I would assume it would be a simple majority in all cases.
One additional thought I have is, we have the athletic associations. The art board now is separate from us, or sort of part of us. What may be helpful, and maybe this isn't the place for it, but sort of understanding that reporting sequence, or that structure sequence. So it's, I don't know, that's so critical for us in day-to-day, but just for outsiders' perspective, understanding how the process works. Or someone's on an athletic association and they want to understand, hey, who do I talk to? They understand what the organizational structure is. And again, it may not be appropriate for here, but I think sometimes it is not perfectly clear. So,
yeah, for clarification, the Art Center Board, which hasn't always been a separate board of the Park Board, they are now, and they do advise directly to the City Council. They're not subordinate to the Park Board, so that, like the Park Board, they make recommendations directly to the Council. So, yeah, Park Board really doesn't get involved in the Art Center matters by virtue of the structure that's now been set up. With the athletic associations, all 14 of them are independently incorporated under the Secretary of State of Minnesota, and we've got a defined relationship and expectations, some mandatory, some on the recommendation side of life. But those policies have been in place that were created by the Youth Sports Task Force, approved by the Park Board, and accepted by the Council.
but again, it's where is that documentation? If I'm an outsider, do I have an access or a place to go to find that? And I think that's the important issue. I don't care where they are, but I think we should be able to have that transparency so people know where to look or how to understand that. Thanks.
I'd be happy to put that online. I think would be another good place. Yeah.
John, is the Senior Citizen Center part of the Park Board?
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm in my 4th year. I guess they've never been an agenda item. Should they be sometime, or is there anything we need to know about it?
When the time is appropriate, absolutely. They do have an advisory group down there for Sue to give her some guidance on programming and whatnot. But no, that's very much like all of our enterprise facilities, although it's not specifically an enterprise facility. If there's a fees and charges issue that comes up, or a programming issue, or any other type of question that would be of a Park Board nature, this is where the arena where it belongs.
May I suggest, Mr. Chairman, we take a look at the draft and email John with recommended changes, and then he could get it to us a few days before the meeting, and we can probably approve it then with any changes.
I think it's a good idea. Maybe we could all just come up with, if we have other thoughts, like Todd had, just email those to John. Yeah, then part of our packet, you could, yeah, I don't see any urgency to get this done today, so if we could just kind of think about it a little bit. So if that's a motion.
If I could just ask one question before you go to the motion. The precipitating event to produce these bylaws was the fact that we wanted to be able to establish committees and that we had no authority to do that, was it not?
You're correct. What has changed in the recent past was that in February of this year, the council passed a new ordinance to their city code that demands that all of our advisory boards and commissions come up with bylaws. I wrongfully assumed, since this park board was formed back in the 1950s, that we had bylaws packed away somewhere. Well, I was wrong. We have some articles of function, and it's worded something other than bylaws, but we never really did have bylaws, to my surprise. So that's what, but you're right, that's what forwarded it. And for us to have any additional subcommittees, we will have to go back to the council and ask before we can form those, until we get bylaws that are approved by council.
Thank you.
So if Dan, that was a motion, I would second that motion.
Thank you.
All in favor? All right. Item 2B under new business was the establishment of some committees, and I actually think there was a third one that should have been maybe on there, was the Braemar subcommittee too. So the suggestion was, and if I saw the meeting of the council correctly, I think there was 3 committees that were approved. One was the facility user fee and other fee related committee. Second for donations policy and naming of park facilities. And the third was a subcommittee to review the responses to the Braemar RFP request for proposals. So I guess under new business, maybe if there, I think for the third one, Member Fronick and Segredo both express interest along with me to be a part of that, and if there are people that would maybe like to be a part of the other 2 subcommittees, you know, can let us know or let John know. Ellen, I spoke with her, and I know that she expressed some interest in being a part of the donations and naming. So that's what I would suggest.
And I made a conscious effort. I did not put the golf course committee only because I thought that we had formed that committee from the March meeting.
Oh, okay.
That was all. Because you had shown an interest to serve on that, and Louise and Todd.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was your subcommittee. That was the only reason why I didn't put it on. It was a formality at that point.
Okay, gotcha. So I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken on any one of those 3 items.
May I ask a few questions about the naming of parks idea? As I understand it, we have an advisory role only, no authority. And the city council has the power to do as they please. Does the city council, John or Mr. Neal, does the city council have a naming policy that we should know about?
They do not. They do not have a policy that's in place.
And you've been park director for about 15 years, 16 years. Has the park board been asked in that period of time for advice?
In my 34 years
34,
here,
excuse me.
but 16 years as park director, I've seen a couple times when the park board has recommended that the council consider a naming policy before naming anything further. And in all cases, the council has sent back the message, we're not interested in a naming policy at this time. We will just do this, it's our decision, and it'll be done on a case-by-case basis. That doesn't mean you can't recommend one that is well thought and see where it lands.
The reason I ask is I sent an email to one or two council members when Mr. Valerie retired with a suggestion, and they chose to take a different avenue. Their power they run, they run the city. It just seems to me, if we as citizens and also as appointed advisors, if we have ideas, we can certainly send an email or a phone call, and for us to spend a lot of time trying to adopt a policy that may or may not be used, probably is not a great use of staff time and member time.
I think the emphasis from our workshop last year was donations and how we accept them. I think the naming is a minor part of that. It's really understanding when we accept gifts, what are the terms that we're accepting them under, and what is the obligation of the city once they accept those gifts. And I think framing of that is really the critical component.
And that I very much agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
Yeah, I'd echo that sentiment. I think I remember Member Swenson at our meeting saying that she would be interested in some sort of donation policy or, some sort of list. Like we had talked about at our meeting, $500 you get this, or, et cetera, et cetera. I guess, in addition, I would like to see maybe it would be helpful to have a little bit clearer definition for what each of these subcommittees would be doing and what the goals would be, or more likely, I guess, a more succinct statement of, okay, we're going to, have 2 or 3 meetings, and by the end of it, we want to know X. I guess it's just a little bit general now, and I think we can all formulate or speculate as to what these subcommittees would be doing, but I just don't think it's that clearly defined exactly what we want to come up with for each of these two. I think the golf subcommittee is pretty clear, where it's just a limited body that's going to see through the process of hiring and taking in the information from the consultant. But I think these two are just doesn't have that level of detail. That makes sense?
I don't see this as ongoing committees necessarily, and so, yeah, I think it's important that we don't need to necessarily do it now, but we understand that there's an objective here. Once that objective is accomplished, these committees are disbanded effectively until something else may come up in the future.
Right.
Just trying to think for facility user fee and other fee-related committee. I'm just thinking if Bill expressed some interest in discussing some of those items, and whoever might be, want to be a part of that, kind of refining what your goals are might be something that you kind of come up with at that level. I don't think anybody that is going to sit in a work group like that is going to want to just have something go into perpetuity if there's nothing that they're actually working on. So do you want to try to define these a little bit finer before we actually?
Well, I mean, the subcommittee is already approved, correct, by the city council? I think it would help the members knowing, one, kind of a level of commitment, and two, what duties and what scope are we going to look at. I think, with the user fees, it seems like, well, we kind of come up with one number, and here's what the total expenses are for taking care of the fields, and here's the user fees that we get towards those fields, and then do we figure out, okay, is that the correct number? Is that in essence what we're doing in subcommittee 1, John?
You'd have to ask your chair that
Okay.
question.
Well, that's kind of the sense I thought I got when we were in that work
Yeah.
session, you know. I thought we were being clearly asked to kind of review, you know, youth athletic association fees, you know, in relation to, you know, each association to the facilities that we're using. Are we, you know, are we getting the appropriate amount? You know, we're getting $9 flat from all the associations, or should we be looking at the associations separately? I thought there was some discussion in regards to, you know, what youth soccer versus softball versus baseball was costing the city to maintain those fields. So that was just it's just a general description of, I thought, a task that we were asked to get into. And then as far as like donations and naming policies, that was something that I know Ellen had expressed a real interest in. I wish she was here. And then we got an email from Jean Persha, which was in our packet. I don't know if it was this month or last month. And I think City Council directed the park board to discuss naming policy. So, you know, perhaps he could come to one of these meetings. But you know, so I guess I didn't think that we needed to establish goals necessarily right here tonight for what we're trying to accomplish with these, but just maybe more than anything else, just to get, if there's people who want to donate their time, and if it's in a subgroup with 4 or 3 park board members and it's not a quorum, you know, it's not necessarily something that needs to be on camera with 3 members of staff. You know, it's a good idea to keep minutes of those meetings, but that was just kind of the intent, to be able to break it down into a less formal environment, to see if we couldn't, I think as John said, roll our sleeves up and get a little bit of work done.
Yes, if I could kind of review the history as I recall it over the last year, the donations policy and naming committee came out of the fact that we don't really have, I mean, we have a policy, but there was a degree of discomfort with what happens exactly when someone makes a contribution to a park. And so I think the initial focus was specifically on parks when someone makes a donation. You know, how is it we acknowledge that, and if that acknowledgement includes the possibility of naming some part of a park, some piece of equipment, a tree, whatever it might be, that we would be better served to have a specific policy, or to consider a specific policy which would cover all these areas. As a second and separate issue, the naming generally came up for, you know, naming something in a park that I guess would be absent the donation component. We had not really discussed that as a second issue, but I think it was acknowledged as being a second issue. Most of us felt, and when we went into that work session, I think we felt that we did need to consider some sort of better developed policy around a donation and naming something in a park or a park around that donation. So that's that one. The second one, the facility user fee. I think that I felt that when asked to approve fees each year for the upcoming year, I was working in something of a vacuum in that I did not understand, nor was I in possession of the history of how these fees had originally been set up. And it seemed as though we were being asked, or we were being asked to approve them on an incremental or exceptional basis. And I, for one, at this point, feel the need to maybe have an overall review of facility user fees, how we establish them, why they are what they are, and whether or not we need to make some basic or just some simple change to the way in which those fees are established. I think it would, at the very least, serve an educational purpose for the members of the board who serve on that committee, and that they are then in a position to better share that information with other members of the park board. So that's my recollection, and I'm not even sure facility user fee is the best way to put it, but revenues overall. There's more that goes into revenues than just fees. And I think the park board has some obligation to better understand them than I do right now, and this seemed to me to be a good way of establishing that understanding. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if that answers what you're looking for, Todd, or Dan.
I like the push for an understanding of revenues, and I agree with Bill, that's more than fees.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, we should be an incubator of new ventures. One of the things that's been happening around the country is, and I can't remember the correct name, but they actually make golf balls that have about 9 holes of life expectancy, and they have a little light in them.
Mm-hmm.
And some sort of something goes on the pin, and that has a light on it. And a lot of young people think it's great fun to take an iron and a putter and go play night golf, if that's what it's called. And, you know, we've got 2 9-hole courses. One of them probably would be a nice place where nobody's going to be interrupted. No homeowners will be waking up out of bed if we make a little money at 10 o'clock at night, having folks or families, for that matter, playing night golf.
So I think the next step here is that by next meeting, we sort of understand who these committee members are, and by the following month, we schedule a committee meeting and come back and report some initial findings, or at least gauge the board's sort of agreement with the scope of what those individual committees are sort of targeting. And also so we get some feedback from John whether or not what we're pursuing as far as information and workload is reasonable for staff to accomplish within the timeline we're looking to do it. So some of this stuff isn't simple. I think about the user fees. You know, that's going to take a little bit of work and digging to figure, okay, how many hours are they using fields for this, you know, and then if we want to get into other income issues as well, you know, we just got to make sure that we're gauging this and structuring this in a way that's reasonable to accomplish the task, but also we don't have unreasonable expectations that it's going to happen in a month. So, but I think if the goal is we come back next time, we're clear who the committee members are, and we set tentative initial meetings, and then we just move forward from there.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay. Item 2C under new business was the Veterans Memorial Committee, and John and I had some communication in regards to whether or not somebody on the park board might be interested in serving on the Veterans Memorial Committee. So if anybody is interested in doing that, maybe they'd like to reach out to John. We'd had some discussion about whether or not that should be if that member of the park board would like to be on that committee as a voting versus a non-voting member. I don't know if anybody has any feeling on that one way or another, if they have any interest in serving on that committee. If they do, speak up or let John know. Hearing nobody jump out of the chair, I'll go with item 2D on the agenda is the Edinburgh Park consultant, which is once again something that came up in the work group or work session that we had with City Council, and I think it's becoming more and more clear that there's an interest in hiring a consultant for Edinburgh Park. So in order to do so, I think we would actually have to pass a recommendation to City Council to do it. Is that not right? Does anybody have any thoughts? Recollect that discussion from the work session?
Yes, I do recollect the discussion that we had, and it seemed at that time to be a strong feeling from a number of the members of the council, as well as more of the members of the council, who were inclined to think that that situation is complex enough and impactful, size-wise, revenues, costs, and enough that a consultant would be warranted. That's my recollection of what happened.
Yeah, and to me, it sounded like matters there were beyond, the tipping point where it would be very helpful to get somebody to come in and assist. John, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the city council, although they haven't given us a directive to go do this, there sure seems to be some strong interest, and I think it would be appropriate for this group to make a formal recommendation, and with that, and staff will be working on a request for proposal, then we would bring back to you for your May meeting for consideration. Look it over, change it. I could even email it to the group once it's done in a couple of weeks, and give me your thoughts there to expedite the process. So we're in good form by the time we get to you with hopefully a final draft by the May meeting. And then you would then forward your recommendation onto the council for them to approve that and move the project forward. It's going to require additional think tank time with staff. Like you said, it's a complex issue. It's a big business. It's a complex business that I would never profess to have all the answers. I have a marvelous staff team out there, and Ann and Susie and their staff. And I'm going to have to rely heavily on them for a lot of those recommendations and to help write the RFP. But if that's the approach you'd like to take, unless you have any questions of Ann or Susie or in the audience tonight to answer any questions you might have.
What I struggle with a little bit, and obviously the RFP is going to cover this, is scope. Are we looking at simple things like, let's put a different type of play structure in there so we can get a little more traffic in there? That's one thing, but I think we're looking bigger than that, and somehow we got to figure out how we're going to frame that. How do we turn that space into effective use for the citizens of Edina, and also make sure that there is some path to break even somewhere out in the future, and if not, what are the alternatives for that space?
I took the time to review the business plan that was included in the packet for this meeting, specifically for Edinburgh. That business plan has a lot of very interesting information, and the numbers seem to be fairly complete to me. If you take a crack at this RFP along the lines that the City Council and the members are talking about here this evening, could you consider any other documentation you could share with us by email along with the RFP that would help us to sort of understand why you're doing it, or is that business plan enough?
Well, we'll be happy to share with you any other information we're going to need to develop an intelligent RFP. And Randy is right. It becomes also a philosophical decision. As you read the business plan, much like most, if not all, community centers throughout Minnesota and the United States, they typically don't make money. It's very difficult to break even unless you have something unique and different that we can bring it closer to that. I think it may be optimistic to think that we're going to make it 100%, much like art centers are rarely ever close to 100%. But we'll come forward with a request for proposal that'll spell out what we think, at least from a staff standpoint, and what we're hearing from the council on the business plan adoption, of what that philosophy should be, what the goals should be, and how we get there, and to throw the big picture ideas, not just an adjustment to the play equipment, but possibly converting the pool to a different use, maybe improve locker rooms, and so on. We got to think bigger picture than maybe items we haven't even thought of, and that's what we're hoping to capture from a study.
Sounds like you might have some work on your hands there to get that prepared. So, a couple months.
I would like to think we can get a first draft done within a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
I would like to be able to, I don't know, maybe put a little pressure on Ann and her staff, but to create the challenge to get it in front of you by your May meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Then let's move to item 2E, which is a community advisory team representative. Ellen Jones had been serving as representative to the CAT group for the Grandview redevelopment area. So I think her one-year term there is up. So if anybody would like to volunteer to serve on that group, maybe let John know.
When do they meet?
I think it's once a month. Maybe not that often anymore.
Anybody know the time or the day? Or
I really don't.
maybe you could let us know in the
Yeah, I could shoot you guys an email, let you know. And Ellen said she was 50-50, be willing to continue to serve in that capacity if there's not an interest from another member to take on phase 2.
So this is the next case, because I was under the understanding that the CAT team had kind of finished their work and had presented.
I'm sorry, this is not the community assessment team for the 9 Mile Trail. This is the community advisory team that's addressing the old public works
Right.
building site.
Yeah, no, and I thought that they were done with that. They had come forth with recommendations already that they had presented to the city council.
Apparently, it's now launched into a second phase.
Okay.
That now will probably consider more grander ideas, which would include the Park and Recreation Department, some other public use that may be of a recreation nature.
Okay, thanks.
Don't forget community gardens in that program. Mr. Chairman, you said the magic word should be willing. So I think we should thank her, and I move that she did such a good job, she'd do a second term.
I'll second.
John, maybe you'd like to send her an email? See. All right. 2F is our June meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, June 14th, which is actually the same evening as Braemar commencement. So if it's okay with everybody, for those that might be attending graduation events, to maybe move the June meeting to Monday, June 13th.
I believe the Park Board really needs to take formal action on this one.
Okay. Does anybody have any?
I'll move to change the meeting to the 13th of June.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 3A under old business is the Braemar consultant RFP. I think, John, is this copy different than?
Yeah, all I just handed out to you is more of what the RFP draft that I sent you would look like if you incorporated all of what Ellen is suggesting to be added. I'm not suggesting that they all should be added or shouldn't be added. I'm just showing you those things in red, and they're all listed on the front page there, what that means.
Is this on the table now? Is it suggested RFP including the items in red?
Yeah, what I just handed out was just, isn't necessarily what I recommend or don't recommend. It's what is, if you were to include all of Ellen's comments, that's all. And you can take some or all or
I think
none
we
or
can be whatever we
whatever you
well
like.
want it to be.
Yep.
Any thoughts?
My thought would be two sort of open-end questions to the consultant, and that's the state of the game of golf. I'm old enough to remember when bowling, of all things, was a big deal on television. And a lot of bowling alleys have closed because people don't seem to bowl. Tennis was much bigger than it is right now. I'd like the consultant to tell us if he or she thinks the state of golf, we all know it, there's too many golf courses been built. With the price of gasoline, I would not want to own a lot of those expensive northern courses, destination courses. I would think it would play into Braemar and municipal courses around the Twin Cities very nicely. But I would be very curious what they've learned about what's going on in the world of golf. Is it a temporary thing that's related to the economy, or is there more to it that we need to know? Secondly, I'd like to know what other municipalities or public-owned courses, what creative programming have they done to increase users? The questions we've got on the handout are quite specific, but I'd like those two open-end questions in there too.
So thoughts and trends, foreseeing in the future for golf, and 2 was, what are other courses?
What other publicly owned courses, what are the communities doing to increase play?
I hear night golf is exploding.
I've never seen a ball that lights up with you.
I've done it actually before.
Really?
So what are other courses doing creatively? I like that. I mean, I like what's on here.
Yeah, I like Ellen's additions, and John, I think he did a great job of coming forth with the RFP in the first place. I think part of Dan's number 2 amendment is found in the market analysis compared to other courses in the Twin Cities. But definitely think that we should get their take on what is going to happen to golf in the future.
I agree with the inclusion of the amendments or the additions that Ellen has provided and read. I might work on the wording a little bit, but that's something I can give you in a minute. I also agree with what Dan is talking about in terms of asking the global questions of golf as a sport, public golf courses, and where that's going over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And then I would add 2 more very specific additions to the scope of the study. We have the number of full and part-time management staff positions. I would also ask them to identify the core competencies for each of those positions and the performance measures for those positions. Thank you.
How will you see, Bill, core competency and performance measures for the positions, or are you looking for, could you explain that to me maybe a little bit?
For the positions. They must know something about the position specification.
Okay.
In terms of the competencies of the incumbents, what you'd like them to be, in terms of performance measures and how you know whether or not the jobs are being performed well. Then it's up to city management to determine how to implement those specific position requirements when it comes to individuals.
Could I ask Manager Neal to come up for a minute? Would you do that for me? I think that's kind of getting, I'm wondering if that's getting into the area if we should be getting into personnel management and how you feel about that.
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, I understand the desire to see that kind of information, and I think from a management standpoint, we will be interested in obtaining that information too. But I think to include that so specifically into the RFP may not be the direction you want to go, because it presumes a direction that we've not made a decision about, and that is the future mode of operations. It may be employees, it may not be employees. It may be a combination of vendors and employees and technology. We haven't looked at what the best mode of operations is going to be for whatever the proposal is going to be in the future. I think if we look at if the Commission and the Council make a decision about what kind of RFP what kind of consultant to hire, and at the end of that process we get a proposal back to us that requires capital improvements or a change in the way that the golf course operates, I think at that point it would be best then to look at how are we going to implement the recommended changes that we see. So I think at this point that information may not be as relevant as it would be down the line.
What if looking at it a different way, if what Bill's looking for to say a course maybe like Braemar would require these types of positions with employees with these specific skill sets?
Certainly, I think you
not making any comment about any of the employees that are there.
I mean, you may be able to get some ideas from other comparable public courses on staffing levels and how they perform in terms of how we perform. And there may be some metrics in terms of staff per 100,000 rounds. There are some staffing ratios like that we see in other parts of city government, police staffing, fire staffing, planning staffing, things like that. So those staffing ratios would be something that we'd be interested in. But to presume an operating model at this stage of what could be a really transformative change in the golf course may not be the right time to do that.
So, Bill, what if, like, under that first red one, where it says number of full and part-time management and staff positions, you also put something like staffing ratios, and for a course like Braemar, what are the key positions that that the consultant would feel necessary? What would the core competencies that you'd want to have for somebody in those specific positions, and what are the metrics that you would evaluate that performance? Would that be okay with you, Bill, without getting into specific with?
Yeah, I accept the city manager's explanation.
Okay.
The rest of these, if you'd like some input, I think with what you've discussed and with what Park Board Member Jones has suggested, I think we can work within. And I think we have to remember that all we're doing with this is trying to attract a certain kind of consultant, and I think this will do it.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you want a motion to go ahead then as it's written and amended?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we get something in there that Bill likes to address what you were concerned with. Are you okay if we just go with Alan's additions, Dan's additions?
Yes.
Okay.
I am okay if we go ahead with it
Thank you.
as it's written here.
Okay.
Excuse me, I move adoption again.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Oh, do you want me to?
But your motion included the two you wanted to add?
Yes.
Did you get those? Okay, all in favor of the motion with the two additions, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay. Item 4, public comments. Anybody from the public tonight like to step up and?
Yes, my name is Rick Wyndham, and I live at 6233 Belmore Lane. And I am also president of the Braemar Men's Club League. And you've just been talking about Braemar. And as we talked about earlier this year, and I can't remember if it was a January or February meeting, we indicated that we were going to invite you to come and attend our spring scramble. A spring scramble is everybody hits every ball from the same place, and it's kind of a lot of fun. And it's a great way to see how the members of Braemar use your golf course. And we would really like to invite all of you. We will be picking up the expense of the day, and we'd like you to see how the members of Braemar use your golf course. And I can tell you, as one of the people here who's won the event last year, it's a lot of fun.
When is it?
And it is May the 19th, and I have a handout here to pass to all of you.
Are you going to give me strokes?
Excuse me?
Are you going to give me any strokes?
We'll let you have your handicap if you have one. Those of you who would not have a handicap or don't play golf or for whatever reason, you're also invited to attend the evening dinner and see how we celebrate at the end of the day. And we've also invited John to come along and shepherd you through the day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wyndham.
Thank you.
All right. Item 5, any updates, John?
Got a question. Just out of curiosity, who is Ed White?
Excuse me?
It's the Ed White shootout, and who is Ed White?
Ed White was one. Ed White, pardon me. Ed White is a member of our club who did a lot for us over the years, and was remembered as upon his death as being a superb member. And we have every year a participation award in honor of Ed White. And this event qualifies for, it's a participation event, and you get to play as long as you participate in the events. And Ed White is one of our members, our memorial members. Thank you.
Thanks again. Any updates? John?
Just two quick ones. As you probably already know, all the 45 holes of golf are open for business. The driving range is stacked about 4 or 5 deep, so we're in full swing. Let's hope the weather holds out for us. The Veterans Memorial Committee is very excited to see the first drafts of concepts that the architects are coming forward with this Friday to their April meeting. So they're very excited about that. So that's moving forward. And that's it for the staff updates.
May I ask, John, how does animal control work? Who does that report to?
Animal control is entirely under the Edina Police Department. Now, when you're talking about goose and deer management, that's different. That's under our department.
We've seen wild turkeys, and we've all been told they're delightful to look at, but don't go too close. I haven't seen them, but we've had sightings of coyotes, which scare all the dog owners. And is there some sort of do you call anybody if you see a coyote?
Animal control officer.
Okay. Do they do anything? Don't know.
I got it.
Any comments from the board? If not, I had one quick question. At Roslyn Park, Cornelia Park, where 66 runs, we talked once about the sidewalk that runs along 66th Street. Is that parkland where that sidewalk is, or is that road right away? Do you know?
Well, I think I consider it both.
Yeah.
Because it is part of the path that encircles Roslyn Park. It's the only part of that pathway that goes around the North Basin where we allow bicycles, because it is wide enough and there's no clear view issues. Several years ago, we've eliminated bicycle use around the lake portion because it just isn't safe, and we don't have the real estate to widen it to make it safe or create a second path. But no, it's really both. I consider it part of the park because we put it down as one of our designated pathways.
Because a lot of kids ride their bikes like to get to the pool, and they're going eastbound on 66 on that sidewalk, and the cars coming the opposite direction on 66. They fly, they're going 40 miles an hour, and I get concerned that a kid might fall off their bike, and rather than, if there could be some barrier, maybe that under consideration. There's a barrier to keep people from falling in the lake, but if a child would fall off a bike, they're going to fall right into oncoming traffic on 66. And there's a lot of people that do use that. So I was wondering if that might ever come up when talking about redoing the paths around 66, if they could maybe construct some sort of a barrier just to protect children from vehicles.
I think then you're probably into an area that the Wayne Hools.
Yeah, that's what I was
area.
wondering. So is it
It's probably
parkboard or?
safer than bike lanes, which are right on the street.
Yeah.
And whether there's room or be appropriate to put up a barrier, how close to the curb do you want it, and it interferes with snow plowing, and there's other issues to consider. But we'll pass that suggestion along to Wayne, have him take a look at it.
Thank you. All right. I guess with that, we will be adjourned.